Hey guys, Thomas the Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review The Northman. If you enjoy my full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you to my Discord, second to my Patreon, third to my PayPal. Any donations are greatly appreciated and help support me and the channel. With shilling out of the way, I'll remind you at the end of the review of all that stuff. And with all that being said, let's get into The Northman. So, the thing I knew about The Northman is I saw the trailers a few times, and I also know this was directed by the person who did The Green Knight, which is another movie I reviewed shortly after that movie came out, and I know I'm a little bit later to this one. So I guess I'll make a few vague comparisons to The Green Knight from the two movies. I'll get it out of the way at the beginning of this review, just so I can say all that stuff now. Comparatively, I can see I suppose, similar vision and style. I would say out of the two movies, The Green Knight has more obscure fantasy elements to it than this, with just stranger creatures that appear throughout that movie. This movie delves more into visions and destiny and all that stuff. So I feel like, technically, out of the two, this is a more grounded movie in the sense. I will say, I did enjoy this movie. This sort of look at, I think it's Vikings, or, not Vikings, but, those who follow Odin, those types, I forget, like, man, my brain is just, like, doesn't even compute where that's from. Anyway, point being, is that, I think it's, like, Norse mythology is what it's called, yeah. So I think it's the name. Anyway, based on that, and based on this movie, if it had been more successful, even more than it already has been, and the director did enjoy let's make a hypothetical situation here. Let's say if he ended up enjoying doing this, sort of semi-historical, like, fantasy kind of story, I could see this director potentially, I'm just gonna throw this out into the ether, you know, and see what happens, potentially direct a video game adaptation of Ghost of Tsushima. I think, you know, if this individual really likes Norse mythology and, you know, hires actors that that follow under that line, I think it'd be really interesting to see someone of that same caliber that does a little bit of that strange stuff here and there direct something like Ghost of Tsushima into a movie. Because I do feel like when I played that game, I do feel like some of these trends that happen in both this and The Green Knight would actually very much fit in Ghost of Tsushima. One note in particular is the following of an animal that will lead you to somewhere that is more prominent, and that is something that is featured in Ghost of Tsushima. I just thought that's the first thing that made me immediately think of that. And the violence and the brutality of this movie in particular, I also feel like it would very much fit in a Ghost of Tsushima type story. Of course, then there is the matching the aesthetic, so, you know, you just have to make it Japanese instead of Norse, and, you know, change up whatever else you need to change up to fit the narrative that is already within Ghost of Tsushima. So I wanted to throw that out there, and I'll also tweet that out, be like, hey, people, think the Northman director should get a chance to direct Ghost of Tsushima movie? You know. Anyways, let's get into the story and plot and characters and stuff like that. So this begins speaking of prophecies and destiny, which I alluded to very briefly, the movie does begin with one in 875 AD with a young boy named Amaleth, I believe his name is. And he's excited to see his father return from a war. And indeed, his father greets him and rejoices. But his brother Fjörnir seems to be a little bit more outraged at his return, and even when the jester kind of jest at him, he seems to not particularly be too kind to that gesture. So, the father wants to die in battle. This is, again, akin to Norse mythology. He wants to enter Valhalla. That is a thing that, warriors of that ilk would have wanted back in that time period. So that is what we see. We see that they also appear to behave like wolves, and through that, when the boy and his father are in this sort of prophecy witch man's house or cave, they both receive, or the boy, Amaleth, receives a vision. We see this sort of tree imagery of him at the top of the tree, meaning that we're following his lineage upward. And that he will, continue this prophecy as foretold. I didn't write the prophecies down, which I probably should have, but suffice it to say is that he is supposed to do something. I'll leave it vague. Anyway, when they leave, his father, which is shown in the trailer, is shot 3 times with 3 arrows. The boy, Amaleth, runs off, and he stops after getting enough distance away to see who the attackers are and who they're led by, which is none other than Fjörnir, his uncle, Amaleth's uncle. The father says that you will be no leader to no one and nothing. You have achieved nothing by doing this, essentially. And thus, after his attack, killing the king, he proceeds to claim himself the new king. Amaleth runs off and almost gets caught, but by this one man who, stays further behind. But he manages to create enough of the distraction to get away. He manages to escape via boat. He makes his new oath that he will save his mother, avenge his father, and kill his uncle. We then cut to years later, where we see him riding on a boat, but it's years later. And we then see them sort of doing this chant of things. And after the fact, we see them cut to a battle, which you might have also seen in the trailer. This is where we see him get his brutalness on. This is also what makes him quite an interesting protagonist that we are following here, as he is kind of essentially doing what Fjörnir was just doing back when we saw him as a child. That is, taking over this land, taking slaves, and doing all this type of thing. He's a part of this new tribe. He's attacking with these other men, taking prisoners, doing essentially close to the same thing. And when he meets this other shaman woman, slash witch, I suppose, she even calls him out on it, saying that you are doing very much that, and that you are, far from the destiny that you were foretold in at the beginning, and to sort of, you had made that oath about killing your uncle, so you need to get back to doing that, essentially, is sort of the gist of the prophecy. So, he tries to learn of where his uncle's location is, and learns that his uncle has been kicked out, and that he had taken the land for nothing, because he was soon taken over after the fact, so his rule did not last significantly long. He burns himself with one of those, steam coal thingies, and he sneaks on a different boat, like a slave boat. There, he talks to this young woman, or a woman around his age anyway, and he relieves his vision of, the whole destiny thing. On their way to Iceland, they move and are talking as slaves. The woman introduces herself as Oga, and she offers that with his strength that he can, kill, and she can use her cunning with her words. So, him using his brute strength and her using her feminine wiles, as it were. And this is probably a really interesting cut. We actually cut to see what Fjörnir has been up to. He's sort of in this outpost with his new slaves, but he seems to be sort of working alongside them, as he kind of puts it, along with his younger son. So he has reproduced at this point in time. Who the mother is, I don't think the movie indicates that necessarily, but nonetheless, Olga, among him, Amaleth, are kept as two of the slaves, because they make their way to this sort of location where Fjörnir is. So that seems to line up pretty conveniently, if we're being a little honest here. So, anyway, while he's doing this, he does a little bit of slave work, but he keeps, to himself, and tries to make his way inside to see where his mother and uncle are, and talks to Olga very briefly about the situation. This is where, after she's being taken away, he sees this creature. I think it's like some sort of wolf or something, and indeed he begins to follow it to another shaman slash witch sayer person, who tells him of this sword that is unbreakable and all this cool lore stuff. He says a bunch of cool things about the sword, essentially, and where to get it from, but he says that it's only to be wielded at night. So he gets the blade after defeating a skeleton or something or other. So very much in line with the Green Knight, in that sense. He runs off, and we cut back very briefly to Olga, who we learn is not clean, aka not a virgin. I think that was what that was supposed to indicate, I think. Which is what Fjörnir wanted of her, to be a virgin, so that, he could have her, he can do that work. Anyway, but on the other hand, Amaleth runs out of time, as he's about to try to cut down Fjörnir right then and there, but it's already morning, so his blade will not unsheath. So he decides to stick around just to make his uncle suffer in the meantime. We then cut to some sort of sport where it's like two poles, and the men can beat each other with these large sticks, and the point is to get the ball to hit the stick that is sticking out of the ground. At first, Amaleth is, not doing too well, and I think he was kind of doing it on purpose. But, in the process, his own team is getting beat, and he's getting beat down as well, so he's getting more invested in... I think it's very indicative of he's more in tone with he's going to protect himself, so he's trying a little bit harder and harder. However, in the last little run that they have, the son, Fjörnir's son, runs onto the stage, or out in the field, I should say, and there, this big man tackles him down and nearly kills him. But Connor manages to live. That's the boy's name. We then cut to a man and woman singing. There's quite a few singing in this. So the older son, so Fjornir had two sons, says that he will now, since they won the game, he will have some more privileges as being a slave, but he will not exactly be free. After the fact, he meets with Olga, and the two get it on. Sexually speaking, that is. So, we hear more stuff as he begins more killing. We get to see him manipulate the dogs to the other dog that we saw persistently how he would howl, and then that would, in this instance, he gets the other dogs to attack the men. And so they start to arm the slaves as they're getting a little bit more desperate and trying to figure out, because on the first night it was like one guy, and then now all of these guys are being attacked. And some of them are even killing themselves in the process of this. And he makes his way to the tent, and this is where he sees his mother. And the mother claims, and this was where another fascinating aspect of this movie comes in, the mother did not love the father. In fact, she insisted that she was the one that told Fjornir to kill him. And it almost indicates that she loved Fjornir a lot more, the brother a lot more. And this is where the movie gets its incest on, as we see her try to get a little feisty with her own son. But he makes his way out of that situation, and he stabs the older son poorly. And the older son is obviously killed in the process. So Amalith, at a later day, outside of that, makes his move when Olga's almost like called out. He brings out the heart of the elder son and say that he will, not free it. And this is where he gets like beat up. And this is like where the biggest convenience of the whole prophecy being fulfilled sort of comes in, where a bunch of birds conveniently free him just so he can be free to do his destiny thing. So, pretty convenient. Another singing thing happens with the woman singing as this funeral is being held for the elder son. And then we cut to a brief image as Olga is a Valkyrie. But she claims that she is not. Moves him away, and that she says that that he has the chance to let go of hate. Now, I think the movie, and I could be wrong about the dialogue, but I did write it as, I think this is where the movie indicates that they were related, him and Amalith and Olga were, because it shows imagery of them on the same tree. I think that was supposed to indicate that she's the sister, question mark? So again, more incest permeates through this. And she even has his blood, excuse me. So Amalith pays to get off this boat that he's on. And we see them, and you see him when he gets to this new to the land. He then cuts down several men, moving in. He goes right into the tent, stabs his mother after that whole ordeal. The son is there, so the son attacks him, and he stabs and kills Connor as well. He kills the boy. And this is where Fjornir enters and sees his, I guess, love interest and his son have been killed. He then, Amalith challenges him to one final battle. Fjornir accepts to meet near the volcano. They do so after he drags the bodies away. They meet in the Gate of Hell, where they begin to process their fight, and the Northman stabs Fjörnir, chops his head off after a quite or I wouldn't say engaging fight, but a little hard to see fight if I'm being completely fair. But he is stabbed in the process, so he dies too, and he smiles as he gets one final vision of his sister having his 2 children, and then the Northman credits roll. And that was The Northman. I would say this is a pretty solid movie. Would I say it's an 8 out of 10? I don't think I would go that high necessarily, but I'd probably say it's still a 7 out of 10, which is the solid mark, which is actually quite a rarity these days, considering. I don't remember the last 7 out of 10 I've given, honestly. If I'm being completely brutally honest, I don't remember the last 7 out of 10 I've given. But yeah, I think this movie is quite solid. Minor conveniences here and there. The whole Destiny angle is something that I feel is a little bit odd. Comparatively speaking to the Green Knight, they have one Destiny speech. Like, the Knight says, oh, I will hit you the same way you hit me. Because the Green Knight cut off the warrior's head. So that's only the one prophecy thing you get from that. Comparatively to this, we get quite a few prophecy moments where it's either confirming his destiny, re-establishing it, or, reaffirming it in some way or another. And we really have only that one moment where he gets told that he might have a choice in leaving it, but he persists in saying that he is born or has been made to only seek revenge, and that is aligning himself back right to his destiny that he's not so inclined to avoid. But I think that also helps him because he, the whole outlook, again, is to die in battle. That is in line with the Norse sort of mythology of, you want to enter Valhalla at some point in your life. You don't want to die an old man. You want to die in battle. So, in a way, the Northman technically gets what he wants. Now, he is not a perfect character by any means, and I think that makes him quite complex. Which is something, again, is really rare to see a character be complex these days. Again, right after his, after being attacked, he proceeds to be an attacker, or he proceeds to go so far off the path that, he has to be called out on it. I do think that the Conquer Your Fate thing poster above his head, I think that's a little bit misleading, honestly. Conquer your fate? He kind of just meets his fate, if anything. I don't think that's how you conquer your fate. I think conquering your fate would mean that you've, beaten it, or, found a way past it or something. I think that's more in line with what it means to conquer your fate, but I don't know if that's a subjective thing or an objective thing. I'm not sure what line that falls under, but I don't know. So yeah, he's quite a complex character. We don't get it awfully too much from Olga. She claims that she can use her words, and we only see one instance of that when they're on the boat, and she, convinces, this one guy to, just leave it be, or whatever. Outside of that, I don't really remember any other moments that stood out, other than their communications and their ancestral moment, I guess. Outside of that, though, yeah, I don't really think she does much. So yeah, I would still give this movie a 7 out of 10, which again, is still a solid movie. And again, if you've somehow made it this far, I would re-engage in the potential of maybe a little Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know if the director of this would have any passion for Japanese history and, Japanese mythology. But I could definitely see the camera work and the bloodiness and the sort of following, the animals. But what I think would contrast really well with Ghost of Tsushima compared to these two movies, that being The Northman and The Green Knight, is that this would be a movie where not only the character would obviously live if you follow the game to its T, if you're following the story beats of the character, but I think what would make that such an interesting mark for this director is that I think following the character's story and have him break away from his destiny, conquering your fate, if you will, I think would actually fit a lot more closer to Ghost of Tsushima. Break away from the thing that has, that might not even be the best little capture card words for a thing, Ghost of Tsushima. Anyways, I'm rambling because I would be really fascinated to see if they would ever do a video game adaptation of Ghost of Tsushima. But yeah, 7 out of 10, pretty solid. If you ended up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page, third to my PayPal. Any donations are greatly appreciated and help support me and the channel. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.